All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, we should be recording. This is a Gateway API meeting for March 7th. We've got some exciting things to go through today, but first up is Jeff and route inclusion and delegation for Gateway API. And I'll hand it off to you.
Thanks, Rob. So it looks like we've got a small crowd today. I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to actually review this document at this point. So we can go through it and answer people's questions if you want, or if people are wanting to review it and then discuss it next week, I'm open to that. I don't want to waste people's time during this meeting if they haven't had a chance to review it yet. So any votes one way or the other?
I'm happy to take the time to go through this, but
right.
open to what others.
I agree. I think the best, it seems to me like the best way to do it is to run through what you've got proposed. Let's ignore the comments until you've run through what you've got proposed, and then we can talk about the comments in light of, obviously if someone wants to ask a question and it's reflected in a comment off to the right, maybe hold on to the question until we've done with that one. But I think if you want to ask questions to clarify what people are talking about, that's cool.
Okay.
Maybe we'll just try to print this like a brief intro for folks who catch the recording and want to come next week and talk about it in more detail.
Yes.
Sounds good. Thanks for the feedback. So basically the approach here is to use, not introduce any kind of new route objects, but rather take the ability we have with the allowed routes struct in gateways right now, and use that or add that to the route rules that we have, in this case with HTTP. So we would use allowed routes as instead of, I guess you would say, a child route, or excuse me, a backend ref when you want to refer to or delegate or include a second route, second level of routing if you want. So that's kind of the very highest level approach. I've gone through, talk about the goals real quickly. This proposal is focused on HTTP. I tried to lay out the logic in a way that would, as much as possible, be generic and be applicable to other types of routes in the future. I just don't know that we have any at this point that we really need to do more than that. The only one I could think of is TCP, and that's a stretch maybe. So delegation is part of this. So there's definitely the intent here of being able to define a parent route at the gateway owners level and let them delegate a piece of the routing off of a listener to another group. So off of a single listener, they would be able to delegate. If you have say a single parent route that would be at a listener, and then within that route, delegate to different namespaces, different groups, different parts under what's coming in under that listener.
Do you think that it seems like you're just talking about delegation? One thing that I didn't really see you explicitly say, I think I have a fair idea what you're talking about, but could you just quickly walk us through what you feel is the difference between delegation and inclusion, or is there a difference?
So I think the only difference in my mind is really intent. So the mechanism is used for both. So there's no reason I can't have a child route that I could be on the child route.
You're breaking up. I think maybe could you hit your video? Sorry.
Hopefully that's better.
Yeah, that's better. Thanks.
All right, thanks for letting me know. There's nothing that, I could be the owner of the gateway, the parent route, and the child route, and I'm simply using child routes to keep my parent route from getting too big. Or I may have, maybe I have multiple domains coming on in a single listener, and I want to do the routing of the different domains in a parent route, and then each domain would have its own child route to take care of things at that level. Just as an example, doesn't mean I don't own that all. It's really optional. It's all the same mechanism. So.
Okay, so would you think it's fair to say, I don't disagree, I just want to make sure I say this to make sure that I'm clear on, that we're on the same page. Would you think it's fair to say that delegation is when parent to child relationship also crosses a persona boundary, or a user boundary?
Yeah.
And inclusion is the functionality that you get regardless. Like the inclusion happens regardless. It's that the inclusion is also a delegation if the one of the parent to child relationships happens to be across two different people own the objects.
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
That feels like a thing that would be good to put in terminology.
Okay. Appreciate that.
That was why I was asking.
As part of that, so obviously that does give the parent route owner the ability to limit the scope of the child routes that they delegate. Which could be path, could be a single host, could be something else. As I was mentioning in just that discussion about inclusion versus delegation, it does allow a model of inclusion simply for a point of view of ease of organization, possibly. And there are also not just ease of organization, but also a way to simplify having potentially different sources of traffic that route to the same service, and not having to find the same route information in multiple places, but rather define it in one place. You can update it in one place without having to risk out of sync scenario. So, Rob, I think Rob has comments here on terminology for parent route and child route, and I think that Rob, technically your comment is correct. I was just trying to, since I hadn't introduced the idea of allowed routes yet at this point, I wanted to. I didn't use it at that point. So. So the two use cases that I've documented here are basically around one is the delegation and one is the inclusion. So the first one is the delegation, and the second is inclusion. I'm not going to go into details of those, but if somebody wants clarification or thinks there needs to be something that changed, obviously provide that feedback. So,
I think the use cases look good.
Thank you. So here's really the top level changes. We'll add a section name to HTTP route. It'll be optional. Also add allowed routes, which would be optional. And it would be any place backend refs used, allowed routes could be used, but you couldn't use the same, or you couldn't use both, excuse me, for the same magic criteria. and then allow a route to have a parent ref that points to another route as opposed to just supporting gateway right now as the parent route. And like the parent route that points to a gateway, and you have you have the name of the gateway and the name of the listener in this proposal. When you're doing a route to a route, the parent ref for the child would be to the name of the route and also the section name that's in the route rules to identify exactly where that route is supposed to plug in. The reason for that logic is you could potentially have multiple routes in a namespace, multiple child routes basically in the same namespace that would be plugging into the same parent ref or same parent route, but at two different places.
But just to be clear, that's the section name. The section name is always optional. You can just say bind to the whole
Yes.
HTTP route.
Yeah, you could use it exactly like, but you know, the use would be just, again, just like backend refs. So you wouldn't have to have section name, but if you don't, then it just plugs into the place that you're defined as an allowed route. But it would
Okay.
it would plug into every place you've got an allowed route in the parent.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah. So yeah. So every allowed route slot, it would attach itself to.
Yep.
I think a follow-up from that and before I go further, I want to say this is an awesome doc. I've obviously commented a lot, but well done. But one of my questions that I somehow did not add as a comment among all of my comments here is what the default for allowed routes would be. So on gateway listener, what we say is, hey, if you're in the same namespace, just by default, you can attach your route to the same gateway. Is that the kind of behavior we want for routes too? Is the default just any route can attach to any other route as long as it's in the same namespace? Or do we want to have a tighter default there where you can only attach to routes that have explicitly specified this?
I was personally expecting it to be exactly the same as the current gateway behavior, so same namespace as the default, but open to alternative perspectives on that.
Don't we talk later about how you need to tell if things are a parent route or not by whether or not this struct is nil? So you can't have a default.
Yeah, that was part of Rob's comment, I think, in the definition of parent is that allowed routes could be null, or if it's not null, it classifies as a parent route. I mean,
you can do, there's some slightly cleverer stuff you can do with defaulting and stuff like that, where if you specify like a single value, then you get like, if you specify you need to specify something. But I think there's just some subtlety there in exactly how we make those rules work, if that's the case. I'm kind of the opinion that this is a complicated bit of functionality that is easy to misuse, and that having people need to do explicit allowed routes of some sort is probably better, because that way you stop people from accidentally, like, it gives you the way to say what's a parent route and what's a child route, because a parent route is anything with a defined allowed route. It gives you the rule that says we're not using backend refs for this thing. We're using allowed routes. You can't have backend ref and allowed routes set on any specific route rule. And then it also gives you the thing where you say, okay, you have to define the behavior that you want, even if that is all namespaces or whatever. There'll be a thing you got to put in everywhere. I think in this case, this feature is super complicated, and requiring people to be explicit and having less magic is actually better. Even the gateway use case is different, because most people are probably going to want to do Like we want that simple, hey, I've got one gateway, one route, one HTTP route use case to be really easy. Whereas in this case, we actually want there to be, it's actually desirable in my view to have a little bit more friction, that you can't accidentally have lots of routes be included. If you're not, you can't, you must have the full two-way binding for this thing to happen. You need to jump through a little bit more hoop, is my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm cautious. I think this is one, a very exciting feature, but then two, like I chatted a bit with some of the people that are implementing the API for us, and one of the key things is implementing guardrails around this, because without pretty tight guardrails, it could become very difficult to implement and or use. And so that kind of, very explicit opt-in, I think is a good starting point. Because you could, like Nick said, you could easily make a mistake that you didn't intend if you're not careful with this.
I think, and related to that, there's one other corollary that I don't remember seeing here, but I could be wrong, is what happens in the case that you have, so we've talked a little bit about the sort of any particular rule being only allowed to be a parent or a child. But does that also imply, the question we need to answer at some point is, does that also mean that if you have a single rule with an allowed route, you can't have other rules in there with a backend ref? Right, that means you can't have like a mixed one that is a child, both a child and a parent, because, and that's important, because otherwise, if you can have some rules be parent rules and some rules be child rules or like serving rules, then you can use that. You could theoretically use that to build an arbitrarily deep DAG of things, which you absolutely do not want. Trust me, I know that's what we did in Contour, and it is a mistake. It makes the implementation code really complicated, because you have to traverse the full graph every time you do a inclusion. You don't want that.
So,
so that is an implementation detail. I'm sorry to derail the discussion. We should not talk any more about that now. I just want you, Michael and Jeff, I want you to put that away in your memory bank and think about it. It is not relevant. It is not germane at this point. I'm sorry for derailing the discussion. Let's continue with talking about the main part of the thing, please. I'm sorry.
okay. If you'd like. So that's the high level. I just gave an example, just kind of a rough example of what it would look like here. This really wasn't meant to make any particular point, just to show a functional pair of routes. So other than kind of some explaining about how combining the parent and child routes are done, I've tried to pretty much have this list of things that I'm showing now on the screen as the summary of everything that's going to be changed or added or whatever. I'm sure there's some little details that have been missed, if nothing else. I think the point about like defaults, what's allowed if you don't specify allowed routes, what's the default, and things like that. But so this hopefully explains everything that we'd actually change. And the list I had at the just before the example is in this list here. So the kind of the key changes or primary changes I just went over, they are included in here. I'm trying to figure out how to go through this a little bit, just because I've walked through a bunch of it already. So parent, one thing is a parent's route could have matching rules, a set of rules to an allowed route, and another that results in a backend ref. So, So you may, as a route owner, you may want to delegate some piece of the route information or routing decisions, but not all pieces of it. So that's the kind of the thinking behind that. Or you might also want a default backend ref for when nothing else matches. The section name is optional. I think we talked about that briefly. It's really just to make it clear where a child route is intending to be inserted into the parent route's rules.
It seems like the child route must include a section name when its parent ref is a route, though, is a little different to what we talked about just a moment ago. So that's okay. Again, that is a FYI, just something to note down and deal with later. Please don't let me derail you. Keep going.
Yeah, you're a good point. Yeah, I did say that you could plug it anywhere into the parent route, and yet here I am saying it must have a section name. So good point. Thank you. But just to keep life simple, because it's already a very complicated proposal and changes, I want to make it so that a child route and a parent route have to be the same route type. I could see a scenario where you might want to have them different. So example, an implementer might want the parent route to basically represent an L4 load balancer. And so it'd be a TCP route. And they might want the child route to represent a L7 processing tier in the network. So it's a scenario I can see, but at this point in the proposal, I'm just saying it's not supported.
Yeah. I think we need to be really careful with that, because that's kind of implying that, like, one thing that I think is we need to be really, really super duper careful with this design is that we don't at any stage imply that the parent ref implies a routing hop. And like, because it's not, this is all about separating config. It's not about describing the routing chain. And, having it so that you can have a TCP route that sort of includes a HTTP route sort of moves us more towards describing I know that makes sense to a lot of people, but I think that the thing that we have erred on at the site at the moment is that routes that describe higher layers are inclusive of the details that are in the lower layer routes. So like a HTTP route is inclusive of the details that are in a TCP route. So you don't need a TCP route to also describe a HTTP route. HTTP route describes all the TCP information that you need to route a HTTP traffic. And the same goes for gRPC route, the proposed gRPC route. It describes all the HTTP information and thus the TCP information that you need to describe the gRPC route. I think that model, and that model is 100% not what some people expect the way that this thing works. But I think if we're going to do that, we need to be very clear about that. That's how it works. And we want to explicitly stop people from using a TCP route that has a child HTTP route, because the HTTP route already has all the details, and that buys you nothing. So, sorry, again, this is a little bit of a digression, but I think it's really important to talk about that. I don't think we've written down anywhere that that's how the route rules kind of work, but I think that it is definitely implicit in how we have designed the route rules, that the different types of routes, and that higher layer routes should include all of the details of the lower layer routes. So ideally, HTTP routes should include like whatever stuff we add to TCP route about allowing source IP addresses and destination IP addresses. I don't think we've done that yet, but there's no by that model, that's how it should work. sorry, I know I am dropping lots and lots and lots of things to think about here. Some of them are relevant to this discussion, some of them are not, but I just need to, some of these I'm going to forget about them if I don't say them when I think of them. So sorry.
That's good. I think in this case, I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a understandable use case for mixing route types. But
Yeah, explicitly not supporting that use case. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. A route could be a could be a parent. Well, let me wait. A route could be both a child of another route and a route directly connected to a listener. So it still only allows one, unless I'm missing something logically, it still only allows one, or basically just two tiers of routing, a parent and a child, not anything below that, but it doesn't force you to have separate quote unquote child routes if you want to use the same routing logic in both a parent, you want to insert it in a parent, and you also want it directly on a listener someplace else.
Yeah, I think that's like I said before, I think that's a really important rule. We really want to avoid being able to create an arbitrarily deep tree of route inclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. Being that we're implementing this too, yeah, we fully agree.
We ended up having to use literally like a visiting graph pattern to on every change on every HTTP proxy in order to be able to determine that.
No, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's bad.
So getting into the reconciling a little bit, in general, I'll talk about how to reconcile the parent and child in general a little bit later, but there are a couple that get special treatment, and that is the host name and the path. So I think many of us believe that one of the most common ways of doing doing delegation or inclusion will be based off of path. But if you're trying to define path at more than one spot, doing things like a regex at a parent and a prefix string at the child starts getting kind of ugly if you're trying to combine those in a single path of logic. And we certainly don't want to make this a spec that requires kind of two loops of processing of the data. It's not like we're going to go through it once and then spin it around back to, loop back, so to speak, and process it all over again. So the way to keep it from an implementer's point of view, relatively straightforward, to make it so that when we are doing parent and child route relationships and are defining path at both layers, we're limited to doing prefix matching.
I mean, I'm not going to say anything bad about that since I'm the one who suggested it. And yeah, I mean, we do the same thing in Contour for the exact same reason.
I just echo that point. Like as I was referring to guardrails, I think this is a really important one. And yeah, and also I should do a time check. If we can wrap this up in another 5 or 10 minutes, I do want to get to a couple other things. But this is really great, and you have emphasized like this is a huge doc that covers so many edge cases already. And yeah, thank you.
Sure. The other kind of special handling for merging routes is host name. So just like we allow you to define a host name at the listener and at the route level, just extend this model, that model, to allow you to define it at the parent, the listener, the parent route, and the child route. So which could be, example, it could be listener is domain name, parent route is subdomain, and child route is host name. This is, i.e., an example.
Yeah, I think if we're going to allow that, then we definitely need to be sure that we sort of be clear that this must be that as you go down the tree, it's got to either be the same specificity or greater specificity. Like, you either need to have it be wildcards all the way down, or you increase specificity at each level. It must either increase or be the same level of specificity. You can't be like specific host name at the listener and then wildcards the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's something that I expect would be a what's called like reconciliation resolution error that would like set a status condition to like preventing it from binding if it tried to do something different than that.
Yeah, and that's what we do. I mean, that reflects. It's basically, as Jeff said, it's taking the same model that we have for listener to route and just extending it for route to route, which I think feels to me like the best way to make sure that this the API as a whole feels harmonious. And I think, without wanting to get into it too much, like that's one of the things that some people mentioned about, like, why don't we use backend ref? And in my mind, the reason not to do it is so that this relationship is the same as that the relationships are the same all the way down. It makes the API easier to understand. There's less conceptual overhead in understanding it. It's hard enough to understand.
I think there's a few other things that I did not make it into this version doc, but I'll definitely add a section on the like alternative ideas or abandoned ideas. I think this approach specifically also makes it easier to prevent at config time the possibility of a route being both a child and a parent by like centralizing the config on the route object itself, as well as kind of like making it easier to detect and prevent potential like cycle loops because of that.
So reconciling, just basic concept is, I've got a section name in the parent, and I've got a set of match conditions in that section, and allowed routes. And so that set of match conditions would be added to each set of match conditions in the child. So I've got, a match and backend ref, for path foo, and I've also, but at the parent, I've got a match off of a header. So that the effective result is that I'm matching on the header and path foo. Same thing with filters. If you want to define a filter at the parent, it does carry down to the child, but it's just anded with the child routes. So.
One thing to just put in there as a thing to think about and write a rule for is, I can't remember if we stated this explicitly, but filters have an implicit order because they're in a list. Is it appended onto the end, or like how does have we been explicit about the ordering of filters? If so, how does the sort of the importing work with the ordering? Don't need to answer now, but just something to make sure that we have an answer for. I don't think what answer we pick matters. It's just that we have to pick one and define.
Good call. I missed that, and I would say it would be ended at the beginning. The parent would be that stuff would be the filters that would be handled first, and then the child would be the next set of filter instructions.
That makes sense to me too, but like I said, I don't think it matters too much as long as it broadly makes sense and we write down the rule.
Yep. So the last thing we'll touch on just real briefly is conflict resolution between the parent and child. The way I've laid this out is
Parent wins is how I would summarize it. Is that right? I think I can't hear you, Jeff. Can anyone else hear Jeff?
Yeah, he dropped out for me. I'm not sure.
Oh no, we lost Jeff.
I
So
think that's the last thing on the list, so we probably don't need a doc. But Mike, do you want to just run us through what you think about conflict resolution?
yeah, so I think Jeff's idea was to basically default to oh no, it's just screen share. It's just default to like a parent wins kind of thing. I think it would help to add a little bit more clarification on what is considered a conflict. I think the example there is more of like a set add, set remove that isn't necessarily in conflict, and something like that, if there was a need for it, could be better handled with like a policy attachment to like prevent a child route from removing a header or something like that, like something very specific. Whereas I think just by default, it should be able to do those things. But that's potentially like a thing that's open for discussion, and we need a little more clarification on what is actually considered to be a conflict.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, I think looking at the comments on the side, John raises a couple of good points about like for filters, maybe filters aren't going to support being specified multiple times, and so that in my mind that's conflict then. And so I think that the broader conflict resolution thing is we need to decide is like how what's the overarching design. So I'm a little bit -1 on like parent route winning because it's kind of an unintended consequence then. Like at the as the owner of the child route, I will see my thing behave differently to what I have configured. And how will I know? Like, am I going to have things set on the child route to tell me? Like, if we're going to do it that way, we have to be very explicit about what the contract is. And if something is not working how you expect, where you go to check.
Or like reject at the binding time of like refuse to reconcile if it specifies something that would be in conflict with something specified in the parent.
I'm kind of more in favor of refusing to allow the bind if there would be a conflict. I think that's again, one of the things that I have learned about this whole process of doing Gateway API is that it's better to like less magic is better. The more magic you make things, the more implicit you make things, the more you're going to have problems with people either doing it slightly differently, or users are going to be like, why isn't this I represented my intent, why isn't my intent and my object was accepted, why is what I asked for not what I got? And in my mind, I feel like that's one of Kubernetes' key API things, is that when you ask for spec, like if your thing is accepted and everything, conditions flip to ready or whatever, then that means that your spec is implemented as you have asked for. Like you don't get sort of some weird change in behavior that's not really visible. And I think the most visible way to do that is just to say, this doesn't work because there's a conflict.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think just being very precise, like in this document, and elaborate on what is considered a conflict, what is like set add, set remove, and how is that handled. What is like something that would be treated as a logical and instead of being a conflict. So like, because I think there could be cases for like refining a filter further potentially and figuring out like what use cases we do and don't want to support. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's absolutely going to be, I think we're going to need a set of general rules, and then for specific types of things, there will be a set of specific rules, some of which may be implementation specific, because, the filter at the filter level, right? Like you've got, implementation specific filters, and then, how do you handle the inclusion thing there? Well, the implementation has to define it. And so like, that's why we need like 2 sets of rules.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I'm sorry.
No. So just time check. I think we're going to move on from this, but there is a ton of good content in here. Thank you to Mike and Jeff for writing this and presenting this. Jeff, it looks like you're back. Thank you. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, and I'll try to later today or tonight, and tomorrow I'll be responding to comments and stuff. So
awesome. Well, hey, thank you both for getting this out, and excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I agree. The last thing that I would say is I strongly recommend that Mike and Jeff, you put a alternatives considered section in there. You're going to have to fill it out when you make this a GEP anyway. May as well get it in there now and get us all talking about it, and should save some discussion on the side.
Sounds good. We'll definitely get on that next day or two.
Great, thanks. All right, so I added a couple docs. These are short-ish. They get shorter as we go. First one is an old doc that you've probably seen before. It had some comically optimistic timelines before that I've since removed, so we don't have to think about them ever again. But I think we are getting awfully close to being able to cut V1 beta 1. You know, you look at our API, we've accomplished a lot of what our graduation criteria requires. You can look down this list. Back in the day, we created a GEP for this API, and one of the things in there is, what does it mean for this API to graduate from alpha to beta? And these are the items that we had in there. We've completed the vast majority of them. The webhook, I think, needs a bit more work. Nick, thank you for taking that one on.
That's on
The users are using most of the API is mostly there. And this all leads to what I think is kind of a slightly different proposal than what I initially thought. I think it makes the most sense to release and graduate to beta a subset of our resources. So specifically, I know that gateway class, gateway, and HTTP route are widely implemented and used at this point. I feel pretty confident in their capabilities, and I think it makes sense to graduate just those resources to beta as part of this release. That means that a variety of concepts and resources, including policy attachment, reference policy, maybe renamed, maybe not, and the other routes would all stay in alpha. There's a few reasons for this. One, I think we do have very good signal on these top 3 resources, but if you try and summarize what we would consider reasonable to graduate a resource to beta, I think it largely comes down to it's covered by conformance tests in at least some fashion. It's implemented by several implementations, and users are actually using it. And I think we can largely say that's true for these top 3 resources. And I don't think we can say that's true for the rest. So with that in mind, I think it makes sense to graduate what we know is good and kind of the core part of the API right now, and continue working on stabilizing the additional resources and features of the API, but not graduating them prematurely. I think that's a kind of a very natural next step for this API, and recognizes that there is a difference in the stability of resources. Any questions, comments, concerns on that idea?
You're thinking on the what we would hold back on at this point and keep it alpha. Would that include the what we just went over, the route delegation inclusion?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's something that
I don't think we can, because we're going to have to make structural changes to HTTP route to do it.
I'm not so. Do we? So that's a good question. One, I think what we'd said is an optional field for name, for rule name, section name, whatever. And 2, my assumption was that allowed routes would also be optional.
Yeah, true. So if we do it with the allowed routes thing, then we can take HTTP route to beta, put all of this stuff into experimental channel. So it's beta, but experimental, and then graduate that stuff to the stable channel when we feel it's ready. Yep. Which is then the versioning scheme working as intended.
Yep.
You know, I think, so I'm +1 in general on the idea. I think we'll need to be careful about how we may have to do some, I've got the docs assessment of the website happening already, but we may have to do some fiddling with the docs structure, because now we're going to have like, there's not one version of the API, there are two. You know, so some object, so you get, we're going to need to restructure this to be via object. Yeah, so you, as always, great minds think alike, Rob.
Yeah, so this is the much smaller doc that's it kind of fits halfway in between this other one. But I think there's two different things we're describing here. One is resources as a whole. When we graduate a resource from alpha to beta, we're saying this resource is something that we're confident about. We're not going to remove it from the API, and we're not going to make breaking changes to it. That's what I think of when I think of alpha to beta. When it's still in alpha, we reserve the right to rename, remove, break, whatever. It's still in alpha. So as part of graduating HTTP route, gateway class, what we're saying is we're not going to break anything about these resources. We will still add things, but we're not going to break anything. Second, field stability is really just kind of a layer on top of a resource. And it's just wherever this resource is, any new fields start in experimental and then graduate to stable. And so they start in this world where, well, they're in this kind of experimental track. We can remove them, we can rename them, we can make breaking changes. But once they get to stable, they're as stable as the resource they're contained within. Yeah, so that's, I need a better way to describe this, but I think this is a really key part of our documentation and kind of, well, this needs to be a key part of our documentation. And I think this concept is important to understanding this proposal of graduating a portion of our API resources up. Does that approach make any sense?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
Yeah, I like
I would
that.
actually like to, oh, sorry, you go first, Mike.
Oh, yeah, just, I like that. The only thing, and I think that I had previously thought backend refs was required, but I look more closely and it's optional. So we wouldn't actually have to make a change. So I think that that should not have any impact preventing us from moving forward with the route inclusion stuff.
Yep. Backend ref is optional for redirects. That was the fun back there. Yeah.
So yeah, before we go on any further, I would like to sort of throw the floor more open to those of us who haven't spoken already. Yeah, sort of, does anyone else have some thoughts here? Yeah, I can see a few people in here who definitely feel free to put them in chat as well if you don't feel comfortable saying them out loud. But this is a pretty big deal, this proposal, and I definitely don't want to go ahead with it unless everyone's had a chance to comment on it. I know it's going to be complicated for me to explain to internal people at VMware that yes, it's graduating to beta, but not all of it. And so like, yeah, so this discussion is complicated. And so like, yeah, definitely want to hear from all of you. Okay, thanks, Lewin. So yeah, and again, of course, if you're watching this recording, the place to go is, you know, the Gateway API channel on the Kubernetes Slack. This is a pretty big deal. We are very much like, we are forging a new path here. You know, we are forging the way to do this sort of thing. We are trying to build the best way that you can manage all of this stuff. There is no prior art. There is no one to tell us that we're wrong. There's only us trying to do the best we can, right? So even we go to we've been to the people at API Machinery and they're like, I don't know. And so, yeah, like, you know, this is going to be us figuring out how to do this the best we can and then reporting back to API Machinery to say, hey, as more people bring things out of tree, this is how they should do it and don't do this because it didn't work. So yeah, it's really important that especially people who are, whether you are an implementer or a user of this API, we need this to be easy to understand. As easy as possible to understand. I would never say it's going to be easy to understand, but we need to have a way to explain this that makes sense to people. And so if the way that, Rob, yes.
Hi, it's Candace. I have I'm from Red Hat. Just a question about the dates that are listed in here, because we have a Monday morning meeting internally about Gateway API, which I've started attending, and we are kind of wondering about the dates. So I mean, I don't really, I see dates here, but which is a little surprising, But I just wanted to check and see, are those dates
No.
real targets? No.
Aspiration.
Okay.
So to clarify, this specific date here, is that what, or were there other dates that you were referring to?
I thought I saw something about November, but that might, yeah.
Okay, so there,
That was a historical.
that we just pretend that never existed. But yes, we had earlier dates in this doc that were aspirational that we just did not hit. For example, I think so this doc originated in around September, and I think we had said, oh, by the way, we expect that we'll have multiple implementations of this API by November. And I think we actually, that is when we actually hit, but it's not this upcoming November, it's actually the past November.
Was last
that one.
November. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe just whack the 2021 in there, Rob, to make sure that.
Yeah, no, I think I
did
just
comfortably-
removed dates and called it complete at this point, but it is still, yeah.
You keep talking, I'm gonna.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I did not update this. Wow, thank you. Thank you. Okay, I will.
All plan, yeah. Sorry, let me just fix this. 'Cause,
Yeah, I'll update this. Thank you for catching that. Very much appreciate it.
No problem. The March 21 date, that's a hope,
Yeah, aspirational.
aspirational. Okay.
I
that's
put dates in.
Isn't that we start the API review at that point?
Yes, absolutely. So that basically what I was hoping for is that we could get at least this done and a portion of the docs updates ready in the next 2 weeks so that we could hand this off to SIG network API reviewers on March 21. And there is no telling how short or long it will take them to review and approve the API. I'm hoping it'll be small because we're just handing them the same API and saying, hey, can this be beta now? Essentially. But want to leave them some time. All the API reviewers we have from SIG Network are very busy people. So that's this one right here of we need to reach out to them in advance and say, hey, sometime end of March, we're going to be looking for your time. Can you block some time off for us? But these are aspirational dates. I intentionally did not put an ETA for an actual release of the API, but you can, extrapolate from there and say that hopefully sometime in April. But
I would also say we are hoping and dreaming and aspiring to have the API, to have whatever beta we have available for KubeCon.eu.
Yes, 100,000%. Yes. Good
That
call.
is definitely the goal, is to have something available in beta before KubeCon.eu.
Yeah, so that end goal is, I think, May 4-ish is when it starts. So really, we are strongly hoping to get this to some portion of this to beta in April. Yeah.
And
I
Nick,
have been receiving the exact same questions, Candice, so I completely sympathize.
okay. Now, there's just one phrase that you said that I didn't catch. KubeCon
EU.
EU. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, conference-driven development is real. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something.
Thank you.
Great questions. So I just sketched out some ideas for what I think is between us and beta in our next release. One, we need to find a way to kind of move off our V1 Alpha 1 docs to somewhere, either removed or archived or something. And then we really need to update our docs so that they can at least be prepared for V1 Beta 1 where it's available. Nick, you're helping with docs audit and cleanup. It would be great. I don't know what the timeline is for that, but any improvements we get out of that will be awesome. And then I had a few very specific things that I think we need to improve or add documentation for. I can take these ones on, but if anyone else is thinking of huge gaps in our in our docs or things that should improve, please either create an issue, create a PR, ping someone on Slack, whatever. Really want to get our docs in a better place. And
that's why I asked for the resources from the Linux Foundation. But so Meha, who's the person who's doing the actual work, she's going through and sort of doing there's a standard, the CNCF has a standard docs review process, which is going to take a little bit. Probably won't be, it'll deliver some useful things like you should do this, some specific outcomes. Probably it's not going to be helpful for this specific stuff. Yeah, but I guess I would to echo Rob, I would 100,000% recommend anybody who is doing an implementation, if you find something that's missing in the docs or something we're not explaining well, that takes you a long time to understand, even if you're not a tech writer enough or confident enough to update the docs, make an issue to say, I didn't understand this. Or there's a discussion topic available as well under the discussions thing that's like, I was implementing and here's what happened. Please put anything where it's like, I couldn't understand this, the way you've described this is bad. Like, that's cool. Like, I think there's plenty of things that we have described very poorly and we have not documented well. Stuff like the release channels is a good example of that. But there's other stuff where we have all spent, Rob and I have spent like 2.5 years at this point talking about this API. So like, there's a lot of stuff that we're gonna know without knowing that we know. And so the only people who are gonna be able to tell us those things are people who are new to the API. And so I would love to see like 50 issues that are nothing but people being like, I couldn't understand this. This is badly explained. That'd be 100% fine.
yeah, completely echo that. If anyone has time or people in their networks that want to help out with this, just by pointing out flaws in our docs, please. Yes. With that, I know we're past time. So
Mike,
let me just,
before we go.
yeah, sure.
Did you have something, Mike?
Nope. Okay. Cool. All right. So yeah, the very last thing, we will probably cut a v0.4.2 probably this week. That will include nothing other than a test of image tagging to make sure that our webhook actually gets published with a v0.4.2 image. So it should not be, yeah. So again, it may be 0.4.2 and 0.4.3. I don't know until we get this working. But that's just watch out for new releases. They shouldn't be particularly meaningful, but that's the goal for the next week or two. And with that, I think we're past time, but thank you everyone for great discussion. Excited about future release, and thanks again for the great doc on inclusion. So yeah,
that is a seriously fantastic doc that needs very little work to turn it into a game. Nice work.
Completely agree.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Glad to hear it.